In this episode we are testing iPhone 13 Pro against Samsung 22 Ultra, and we'll start with the front-facing camera. And if you see the first thing, how brighter is the Samsung. The display is much better than the iPhone. On the left side we have the iPhone, and on the right side is the Samsung. And first I noticed two things. The iPhone front-facing camera is wider than the Samsung. The Samsung is a little bit tighter. So for vlogging, the iPhone looks better. Meanwhile, I also changed the sound so you can see which microphone sounds better, but both of them should be pretty decent. Another thing I just noticed is that the Samsung display looks better than the iPhone, but it has problem with the polarization. Right now I'm wearing polarized glasses, and at the moment I rotate the screen around 15 to 20 degrees, I see nothing. So right now you can see the screen. Watch what will happen when I put my glass over the lens. Do you see how it disappeared? And now if I rotate it, you see the screen. That's the blind spot of the Samsung. Really annoying issue, I didn't expect that. -1 point for Samsung. The macro camera on both phones is positioned on the ultra wide angle camera. Next we're gonna check the stabilization. Mary will ride the bike and I'll run after her. We record in 30 frames per second, we'll not slow down the footage so we can really see the real stabilization of both phones. We'll check all the lenses. We'll do exactly the same with the telephoto lens, but to make the real example, we'll walk, because nobody runs with the telephoto lens, it will be too shaky. There is one thing I like more on the Samsung, how you turn on the camera. You just tap 2 times the power button and the camera is turning on. With the iPhone I have to unlock the screen and then swipe for the camera. Samsung did it better. Now we're gonna test the HDR and the slow motion at the same time. We'll record 4K 60 in HDR mode so we can compare it.
Joyride, a hit and run. I thought I loved you and you thought I was fun. I'm moving on down the road. Watch me as I go, watch me as I go. Should I look both ways before you cross me, baby? 'Cause I don't break the voice. I'm moving on.
We just got photobombed by police horses. They were like awesome. So the downside of the Android phone of Samsung is that you cannot record HDR 60 frames per second. What the heck, guys, are you advertising that you're beating the iPhone? You're the best camera ever. Like, iPhone can record ProRes and it can record HDR in all settings except slow motion.
So just to understand how far away he's going, like half a lake straight.
I'm moving on.
A stone just punctured the tire. Now we have to walk back home. Just hear how it's sussing. After walking for 3 kilometers, we came to the shop And we bought a spare tire, and Mary is buying a mat, and that's the portrait mode on both phones.
I'm moving on. Said I let both ways before you cross me, baby, 'cause
It's time to check the night capabilities of both phones. That's the front-facing camera. At the moment I can see a lot of noise on the iPhone. The Samsung looks a little bit cleaner, but that can be misleading. I really have to check the footage on the computer. Here is the best lens, the wide angle. From what I can see is that the iPhone has a lot of flaring. Samsung doesn't struggle with that. Oh, actually the flaring is more or less the same. It really depends on the angle, but the Samsung is much better. From what I see from the screen, it looks like Samsung really caught up with the iPhone. The night mode looks really good on the wide angle lens. It looks like Samsung is really crushing the shadows. But on the telephoto lens, the stabilization of the Samsung looks really good on the screen. I really love what I see with the wide angle lens on the Samsung. It looks that it's a little bit better than the iPhone. I think it's because of the flaring. When the iPhone flares, the video quality is a little bit reduced. Now I'm recording with the ultra wide angle. Both phones has their pros and cons, and it's really hard to say which one is better. Is it the iPhone or is the Samsung? That's why I broke them down in 17-18 categories, and we will assign points so we can judge which one is the overall better package. One area where Samsung really surprised me was the consistency of the camera. With the previous S21 Ultra, all lenses were different, and when you compare the footage, it looked like it was taken on different cameras. The new phone is much better. So both iPhone and the Samsung get in that category 1 point because the iPhone is the king of consistency. And finally, Samsung caught up. The next category is the macro mode. Some small differences here and there. On the iPhone is a bit easier. You can get a bit closer to the subjects. Both of them have the macro mode. Both of them produce amazing footage. So 1 point for both phones here. Next we have the front-facing camera, and unfortunately the Samsung here is the loser. The front-facing camera is tighter, and I really dislike the sharpening happening on my face. I look like zombie in some light conditions. Next is the ultra-wide angle camera. Here the Samsung is a bit tighter. It's 0.6, it's not 0.5. On the iPhone is 13 millimeters. I would say that on the Samsung is 14 or 15 millimeter, the field of view. iPhone 12 had worse ultra wide angle camera compared to S21 Ultra, but at the moment they're neck to neck, so both of the phones get 1 point. Wide angle camera, the situation is very similar. Both cameras are really close to each other. So 1 point for the wide angle camera. Telephoto cameras on both phones is similar and different at the same time. I prefer the telephoto camera of the iPhone. To me, it looks that the iPhone has a tad better quality than the Samsung in the telephoto camera, the 3x zoom. So here again, 2 points for both phones, 1 for the iPhone and 1 for the Samsung. Now, one thing that is very different for the S21 Ultra is the telescopic or periscopic camera. That's the 10 times optical zoom. 1 point to Samsung for that. Unfortunately, I'm really not happy with the footage. Even in midday bright sunlight, the footage is very muddy. I really like the compression. The footage you can get is really amazing, but it's very muddy. Now let's talk about the stabilization. Here all the Android fanboys gonna hate me. The stabilization on that phone sucks as heck. When you compare the footage side by side, Samsung looks like the winner, but unfortunately it's not. The stabilization brings a lot of artifacts and a lot of micro jitters and wobbles, and they're very prominent, especially in low light conditions. So 1 point goes to the iPhone and I'll give 0.5 points to the Samsung. The stabilization is there, but I would prefer having worse stabilization without artifacts than having better stabilization with artifacts, because the artifacts are impossible to be fixed on post-production. Next is the HDR. Both phones can record in HDR, but the iPhone here it's killing the Samsung, because the Samsung can record HDR only in 30 frames per second. You can't record HDR in any other frames per second. It's ridiculous. Next we have the night video mode. Here both phones are performing really well. When you consider that you're recording with a phone camera, the footage is not perfect, it's very noisy. The iPhone performs better. I would give 1 point to the iPhone because it's a bit better than the Samsung, and I will assign 0.5 points to the Samsung. The Samsung really caught up with the iPhone, but some things are really not perfect. Now, when we are speaking about night mode, we cannot ignore the lens flaring. Here, the iPhone will get 0 points and the Samsung will get 1 point. Next, we have the portrait mode. I saw so many people online screaming that Samsung is killing the iPhone portrait mode. I haven't seen that. iPhone portrait mode is struggling with a little bit fuzzy borders around the subject, especially when you put the f-stop to be 2.8. But if you increase the f-stop, then the edge is increasing dramatically. The second huge advantage of the iPhone is that I can change the focus and I can change the f-stop after I recorded the video. Huge disadvantage of the iPhone portrait video or cinematic mode is that it's shifting the colors a little bit. It's making the whole image softer in some way. Samsung, on the other hand, has really clean edge. It makes the image very contrasty, which I like, but it deals horribly with the depth of the blur. The other huge struggle with the Samsung is the focusing. If you're not close to the subject, the phone is struggling focusing. The iPhone doesn't have that issue. Even if I'm like 10-15 meters away from my subject, it will immediately focus on the face and it will allow me to use the cinematic or portrait video mode. With the Samsung, you're struggling with that. One advantage of the cinematic video on Samsung is that you have different features. You have black and white background, you have glitch background, most probably later on they can add some other effects, and that makes the portrait mode very fun to use. So both phones have the cinematic portrait video, and both phones struggle in some area and are really well performing in another area. Next, we have the time lapses. And here I'm pissed at both phones. With the iPhone, I can record only 1080p time lapses. But the huge advantage of the iPhone is that you have the low light performance time lapses that are behaving like a real professional camera. And the time lapses at night are really beautiful. With the Samsung can record 4K time lapses, which is amazing. I'm really dreaming the iPhone to be able to record 4K, but the time lapses can be recorded only with the two lenses, with the ultra wide angle and with the wide angle, and you don't have a pro mode in the time-lapse section. And at night the time lapses are looking horribly on the Samsung. One of the phone gives you 4K but doesn't give you any other features. The other phone can record with the three lenses, have amazing night mode for the time lapses, but it doesn't record 4K. So I'm pissed at both phones. That's why I'm giving them 0.5 points. Next we have the slow motion. Both phones didn't move much from the previous generation. Same things, 120 frames per second, 240 frames per second. I'm really pissed at Samsung because I can record slow motion 240 frames per second only with the main lens. I can record 120 frames per second only with the ultra wide or with the wide angle camera. With the iPhone, I can record 120 or 240 with all the lenses. I don't understand why Samsung is restricting me. It's ridiculous. So I give 1 point to the iPhone and I'll give 1 point to the Samsung only because you can record 960 frames per second. But I'm really not happy that the slow motion didn't move an inch from the previous generations. Next we have the microphone. And this year Samsung really surprised me that it's performing better than the iPhone. Last year they were neck to neck. This year Samsung is killing all the environmental noises and it's isolating your sound. 1 point goes to Samsung also for the ability to film 8K. Let's talk also about the pen. I'll give to the Samsung 2 points only because they included the pen. That's my most favorite accessory I've ever used with any phone. It's so intuitive, it's amazing. Editing videos on the Samsung is easy peasy with the pen. Let's talk about the display. So -1 point to the Samsung. Now, if you ask me which phone is better to buy, which one will be better for me? Honestly, they're neck to neck and really depends on several factors. If you have a MacBook, go with the iPhone. If you have a Windows machine and you love Android phones, better go with the Samsung. I'm locked in the Apple ecosystem and using my headphones, transferring files, it's 10 times easier with the iPhone. Connecting that machine to the MacBook every single time I want to download a photo or a video, it's really annoying. Both of them have pros and cons, so for video content creation, I would still go with the iPhone, but the Samsung at the current moment is on 97% of what the iPhone can offer you. Hope the video was helpful. See you in the next one. Bye!